All right, we're on. Roderick, good morning. How are you doing, my friend?
Fantastic, man. It's been ages. So great to catch up with
It has been a long time. I'm super thrilled and excited to be talking today. Roderick, obviously you and I met about 10 years ago. I think it'll be 10 years in November.
you. And
You
where
and I
is
were,
time going?
time has flown by. Uh, uh, it was at Salesforce. I was on the renewals team, part of the CFL organization, and you were heading up the sales enablement team. And I remember in my first week, the onboarding that we did together, you helped facilitate. You said something that has stuck with me in my mind ever since. You said, stop giving presentations and start having conversations.
Yeah.
And that was the initial sort of experience that set off again, this relationship you and I have maintained over the years, despite having gone our separate ways. I went and became a VP of customer success at a few different companies, and you've had some pretty significant accomplishments as well in that amount of time. So what I want to do today is just kind of dig into that and understand like your journey and your passion and how you got to from where you were to where you are now. Do you want to give just a brief intro of yourself real quick before we go any further?
Sure. Roderick Jefferson. I hold a dual role. One, I'm the VP of Field Enablement at Netskope. We are an incredible pre-IPO cybersecurity company. Also, the CEO of Roderick Jefferson and Associates, which is a consulting firm. So it's a busy time. I'm not actively consulting at the time, but that still sits in place. Also, recently, an author of an Amazon bestseller, oddly enough. About me, I always start here. I'm a sales guy. I am not a trainer by trade. Started out at AT&T years ago as a BDR, got promoted to AE, went to President's Club a couple of times, went to President's Club when we were together at data.com Salesforce, and then got promoted to sales leader, which I promptly turned down. And people think it's crazy, but I actually enjoyed the process of selling more than I did taking down big deals. So what I did was talk to my regional VP and said, what if I could share my rudimentary templates and tools, and I could do two things. One, get people up to speed and accelerate revenue faster. And secondly, get more people to President's Club. Well, who's going to say no to that, right? So I talked myself into a new job. And from there, I held a number of positions in sales training initially, right? And that's what it was. And then in about 2004, I actually created this nomenclature that we call sales enablement. Actually, on a fluke, being a smartass one day in a meeting with one of my sales leaders at Network Appliance. And he said, we don't have enough pipeline, throw more training at it. Our people can't handle messaging positioning, throw training at it. We're discounting too deeply because they can't handle objections, throw training at it. And I said, just off the cuff, actually, you train people, you train animals, you enable people.
I like that.
And there was the genesis of what we know globally as sales enablement today. And from there, and we can talk about this in depth. I've run enablement at Network Appliance, Siebel Systems, eBay, HP, Oracle, Salesforce, Marketo. Then I took a brief couple of years and I actually consulted on my own because I felt like I was getting too ivory towered. And then decided wanted to come back in because I love actually grooming teams and being part of a leadership team, and was blessed enough to be brought back in-house at Netskope and been here since January.
I love it. It's quite a list of accomplishments. And I don't think that these things happen by accident. I think that through your life experiences and your training helped arm you in many ways. So let's take a step back. Let's go back to sort of like your childhood and your upbringing. Can you just give a brief summary of, where you grew up, what your life was like?
Sure, really quickly. Born in Louisiana, grew up between Louisiana and Texas, and then moved to California later in life. I think what molded me was I grew up a military brat, right? So discipline and goals were all instilled early. And those were just things that you did, right? And growing up back and forth, I was adopted. So I grew up in two families, which was phenomenal. I'm the second oldest in one family, and I'm the youngest by 10 years in another. So I got a chance to groom and be groomed, and I have 7 sisters older than me. So I got a different perspective there. Then getting later into middle school and high school, I became a pretty high profile athlete in basketball and football. So again, now you've got these leadership qualities that are being groomed that we don't call it that.
Right.
But All of these things, I think, the sum of all parts. And growing up in one family, dirt poor, grew up in the projects, rent was like $12 a month or something crazy like that, right? But what we learned was the value of family, the value of integrity, the value of maintaining your word. And you also figured out the pecking order, right? Of where you sat in the totem pole. Now, I have the polar opposite of that, where in the other family, for my 16th birthday, I get a BMW 320i.
Wow.
So can you imagine the dichotomy of trying to balance those two worlds as a growing up kid and never feeling like you fit into either one of those? So constantly trying to find your way. And my way was through some form of leadership.
Okay. That's really interesting. So you had a lot of influences with such a large family.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of unusual. And thank you for sharing from a personal perspective.
Certainly.
That you were adopted. Was there any one person that maybe stood out more than any others? Obviously, they were all influential, but was there any one person that maybe stood out more than others as like a mentor, or that helped instill the values that you hold so true even today?
I would say one uncle, one aunt, and 3 moms, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Again, being adopted. So what I got from them was different. From my uncle, he was teaching me how to be. And then my dad at the time, who has been estranged, was teaching me how not to be a man, that is.
Yeah.
Right? And then you've got my Aunt Peg, who was always in my corner, always in my ear, and made sure that I stayed on the straight and narrow, because there was no option of getting off of that, right? And then you've got my moms, who were instilling that nurturing piece, also work ethic, and what the value. And I remember being taught early, there is nothing more valuable in this world than 2 things. One, keeping your word, and secondly, always making sure that you bring positivity to your family name.
Yeah.
And that sticks with me to this day.
Those are great values. I love that. Now, Roderick, I'm a family man. I have 2 boys. I'm just curious, are you a father now? Do you have a family?
Oh, I've got a 31 and a 22-year-old.
Okay.
Fun years. So I've got one in college now, and he's finding his way. He went into the military reserves, following the family DNA. And I've got another one who, my clone, my daughter, who started her career at LinkedIn. She did 3 years there. Now she's over at Facebook, Instagram, creating her own logos now, as I say.
So tell me, as a parent, I know for me, I saw my father in a different way once I became a father myself.
Absolutely.
So I'm just wondering, did you see any, did you have any sort of epiphanies or anything like
I did. As again, I say my dad and I were estranged. Both my dad, my paternal dad, and my adopted dad was never really close to either one of them. So what I learned from them was literally how not to be a dad. I learned all the things that I never wanted to share with my kids. Don't break promises. Don't say you're going to do things and not follow through. Never not make them first. Interesting story. I cut both of their umbilical cords when they were born and released them into the world. Yes. Wow. With the same statement to both of them. You will never want, nor less ever need for anything as long as I have breath in my body. I promise that you will always be my first priority. And to this day, I guarantee you, my kids would say they are still that. But from the dads, I learned how to and how not to both. I don't want to put a negative slant on it.
Sure.
From them, I learned that it's important to remember, and they don't come with an owner's manual.
Yeah.
Right? We're all learning along the way.
That's right.
The epiphany that I got from them was when I got to a certain age and stage in life, I looked back and realized how young my parents were when I thought they were old.
Right.
Right. And you go, wait, they're in their 30s trying to figure this out. I remember in my 30s, I didn't have a clue of what I was doing, other than I had them as an example of good and bad. Right. So you look back and go, when you start doing the math, wow, okay, they did okay for the age that they were at the time and for what they had to work with. The other thing I learned from them is to teach the kids, which they couldn't because they didn't have any at the time, but to teach my kids fiduciary responsibility. And that is how important it is to start saving earlier in life so that when you get to my age, you will be in a position better than me. My mom taught me one thing. Our job as a parent is to ensure that our children have a better, not an easier, but a better life than we did. And if we do that, mission accomplished.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you. So talk to me about, aside from the family life, then you mentioned sports and being in basketball, and I think you said football. So talk to me, I often have said, I believe that there are, not by accident, parallels between, your upbringing at home and then what you experience in sports. So can you talk to me about, outside of the athleticism, some of the values you learned through your
Absolutely.
athletics?
I mean, you learn so much from athletics. You learn how to lose and win with grace.
Yeah.
You learn how to deal with different personalities. You also understand the importance of the interdependency of everyone on that team.
Yeah.
You learn that real early. Everyone has a voice. Coach has the final vote, right? On calling plays, on who plays, on pecking order. But I think what you learn more than anything is how to deal with people and how to start to understand and read people. I coached football and basketball after I played for about 20 years. And I didn't even realize these things as I was playing. I realized them more as a coach. Also learn how to deal with parents. I'll say that much as a coach. It's very different than as a player. But what you learn is, and I always say this to even which were kids that are 30 something now that I coached early on, I always taught life. I just used sports as the vehicle.
Got it. That's great. So let's change gears real quick. So after understanding again about your upbringing, and you mentioned being from a military family, I guess, around, I'm a fan of Simon Sinek. He talks about, starting with why. To me, it's clear, knowing you, that you're wise. You have two, it seems like. It's one, you're passionate about sales enablement, but you're also passionate about coaching and mentorship. Would that
I'm a people person at my core.
Yeah.
I think, to sum it up, it is, I learned, and it took me a while, I was probably in my 40s, and I kept having this unanswered question. What is my purpose? That we've all asked, right? What is my purpose? What's my purpose? And I finally, one day, the light bulb went off. My purpose is to ensure that everyone that I interact with has some level of improvement in their quality of life than before I met with them. So I can do that, mission accomplished.
Yeah, and there's great satisfaction in that. It makes you feel good.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're doing what you love. I've met people though that aren't. They're doing a job for the sake of a paycheck.
Right.
And you can see that they're not happy. Have you ever encountered anyone like that? And what advice did you give them, or how did you coach them, or,
Lots of people, both mentees as well as even mentors of mine. And I have this philosophy that I call, and I write about it in my book, I call it my candy bar job. You get to a stage in life, in an age and stage in life, where you go, what would I do if I was only paid in my favorite candy bars, which happens to be Reese's peanut butter cups, right? And I'm doing it now, but not everyone gets there. So I had to come to the realization that, one, not everybody is going to ever get to that candy bar job.
Right.
But you can figure out what that is and try and take and put things in place so that every day you get one step closer to that candy bar job. It's not utopia. Look, we both know life is not unicorns and rainbows all the time.
Right.
But it's too short to be miserable all the time. So my response to that is, if it makes you miserable, if you dread Sunday nights getting ready for Mondays, and I think we've all been there at some point in our careers,
right,
then you're doing the wrong things. Jobs are too plentiful right now, all right, to do something that you absolutely hate or dread, or that does not bring you satisfaction. It may not be your candy bar job, but at least it's one step closer to it.
Right. So when we meet people like that, I guess, an example of making their lives better, if we can help them maybe go for that dream, maybe go for what they're passionate, understand the impact not doing so is having on their lives, their morale and their productivity, their well-being. It makes a difference. So
I approach it from a process like this, Antoine. There's 3 steps. It's, what are you really good at?
Yeah.
And I say, get a whiteboard, split it into 3s. Yeah. What are you really good at?
Yeah.
What do you love doing? And what would, of those two, what would someone pay you for? Either in a corporate job or an entrepreneurial space.
Right.
Because I think corporate America is kind of like college and marriage. It's a great institution, but it's not meant for everybody. Right? So take those two and go, well, what would people pay me for that I love doing that I'm really good at? Because there's a lot of people that are doing things they're good at that they don't love. Right. There's a lot of people that love things, but they're not really good at it.
Right.
So where's the intersection between all those, that Venn diagram? What sits in the middle of both of those? That is the candy bar.
Okay. So I think the fact that you're so good at what you do is no surprise to me, just based on what you're saying, because you've aligned your why with, you know, what you're doing. And I do believe that the universe sort of aligns itself to you when you are following your heart, so to speak, following your passion.
Absolutely.
So I think back about like when we first met, again, 10 years ago, and I sat through your sales enablement
the boot camp.
The boot camp, that's right.
Yeah.
And again, I mentioned earlier in the conversation, you said, stop giving presentations, start having conversations. That again really stuck with me. And personally, I'm very also passionate about the spoken word, human dialogue, conversations.
Absolutely.
Now, my observation is that because of technology, we are as a society moving away from spoken word, and I think we're relying too much on text messages and Instagram posts and
you know, microwave society is what we've become.
And again, that it's kind of sad to me in a way, because would you agree that when you speak to someone and you connect on a certain level, and that again, the beauty of the spoken word and human conversation, it's really something that cannot be replicated with technology. So how are you sort of dealing with that? Maybe, you know, with technology and its impact on relationships?
It's interesting. I firmly believe that social media has made all of us less social. I truly do. And the reason is the gratification comes from, I now have control of what the conversation is, how long it goes, and in what format it goes, right? I've watched my kids text back and forth for 15 minutes, and then the phone will ring and they'll decline the call and text the person back. And I said, why? Why didn't you talk? And it was just mind blowing. And the response was, I want to communicate on my terms.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, now I get it from the Gen Z and the millennial perspective. For us, it's intonation and inflection. It's eye contact. That's another thing that we've lost. People are afraid of eye contact because they've gotten so used to being behind a keyboard now.
Right.
But when you sit down and really have a conversation, to me, the best part of a conversation is listening. It's not about talking.
Right.
It's not giving the right answers, even as a mentor or a guide. It's literally about asking the right questions that will allow that person to really inform you. If you are a people person and you're about learning, truly learning from others, you'll have probably 3 or 4 questions and that's it. And let that person just flow.
Right.
That's a lost art of really having a conversation. And I think, and look, I don't need Microsoft calling me because I said this. I hate PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint, not the tool itself, but the way that we have been taught to use it as a communication tool. It's not. It's an information and a productivity tool if it's used properly.
Yeah.
What it does inherently is it forces us into either paragraphs or bullet points, or in some cases, graphs and things of that sort. But for the most part, it's literally about creating a presentation piece. I'm going to take you through these steps. Either it's messaging and positioning, or it's competitive or something of that sort. When you get away from that, and you say, for instance, what if you left PowerPoint behind and changed your approach to, and we'll call it for business purposes, to prospecting with a whiteboard? Look at the difference. The PowerPoint says, one, I don't need to know it or even imbibe it. And I can go, you know what? I can hide behind this. Let's pass slide 6. We'll come back to it. You know you're not coming back to it. But when you're whiteboarding, it literally forces a conversation, because you could draw up something and they go, wait a minute, stop. Tell me more about that. Now you need to be able to have that one-to-one ebb and flow conversation.
Yeah. It really is something special when it happens.
It's magical when it's done right.
It's beautiful. Yep. And I think for what it's worth, it's not just in a professional sort of environment, but obviously at home and in your personal relationships as well, because dealing with humans.
Yes.
So let's change gears real quick and let's talk about your leadership style. Now, I've never been afraid to admit that I'm not the world's greatest leader, but I'm trying really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a lot better today than I was 10 years ago.
And we're riding in the same boat, my man.
Yeah, so
much better now than I was.
So talk to me about your sort of leadership style now versus what it was, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Talk to me about like your journey there.
10 years ago, it was autocratic. And I'm the first to say it. It really was. This is how things are going to go. I sit in the big chair. I'm the person that knows this piece. I was put here for a reason, right? Like we all have to go through it in our maturation cycle. Now, the way that I describe my leadership style is flexible, and it's individualized. I cannot give the same approach to everyone on my team in peanut butter because they're different people. And what I've learned is humanity and empathy goes a long way in leadership.
Yeah.
That I don't think I know I didn't have early in my career.
Yeah.
Now my leadership style, again, flexible. I have more conversations than directives. I try my hardest to stay away from directives, only when absolutely necessary. I think early on, everyone had a voice and I had the final vote. I don't have that mentality or mindset anymore. There are times I'll say, yours is way better than mine. Let's go that route.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I was capable of saying early on in my career. I have become, because I think with competence comes confidence, right? And with confidence comes competence transversely. And the more you do, the more you learn. And sometimes you have to learn how to, other times how not to. So I would say that it is literally the sum of all parts now.
I agree. And at least in my case, there were definitely experiences that stand out of my mind where sort of the light bulb went off. And in fact, one of them was at Salesforce when an employee actually enlightened me that maybe I wasn't as great a leader as I thought I was at that time. Blinded by my hubris.
Yeah.
I thought I was helping people when in fact, they weren't succeeding because of me, they were succeeding in spite of me. And that was sort of an aha moment for me. So did you have any experiences for that, like that? And because I committed myself from then on to getting better, but
I've had teams where to this day would still run through a wall for me. I've had teams to this day that I'd say one of the proudest accomplishments of my career has nothing to do with awards whatsoever. It goes back to the fact that I think 3 of my last 4 jobs, I still have everyone from my team on my personal social media. That speaks volumes to me as a person and as a leader. Now, it's not unicorns and rainbows. I had one experience where because of my lack of leadership, because of my arrogance, and I'll put it on the table, I almost lost an entire team that just literally mutinied and did not want to be under me anymore. You know what? In hindsight, when I look back on it, that was probably the biggest learning experience that I had.
Right.
And I had to take ownership of that and literally had to look myself in the mirror and say, you blew it.
Yeah.
And that was a tough moment.
Sure.
But I think probably some of the best growth came out of that role where I went, and I've gone back to each of them individually now and apologized and all of that. But in the moment, I thought that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. Right. Versus looking back on it and going, what's the right thing to do on behalf of the people? Not yourself, not your title, not your company logo. But what was the right thing to be doing on behalf of the people? And that is the philosophy I take forward. And my leadership still is all about people.
So that says a lot about your character, right? Because looking in the mirror and being aware of your sort of shortcomings is hard. It's hard for people to do.
Absolutely.
It's scary. And as a result, most people don't do it. The easy thing to do is to point the finger at everyone else. So,
Remember when we were together at Salesforce? And besides that point you made, there was one statement that I would always make, and I still make to this day, and I'm going to take you back 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm on a mission to kill the statement, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Both personally and professionally.
Right.
You have to get away. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Growth does not happen in comfort.
That's right. So it is uncomfortable. But I think the reality is, I think the truly successful people are the ones that can have that moment of opening themselves up to criticism and admitting their own shortcomings, with also committing themselves to getting better. So talk to me a little bit about
that. Is the key.
Okay, so talk to me about, I see it like in 3 different phases. There's leaders that don't self-reflect at all and think that they're great, but they're really not. That's one flavor. Second flavor is the ones that, okay, I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm going to admit that maybe I'm not that great. And then the third flavor is ones that then commit themselves to get better. Now, one thing that I struggled with for a while, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, if you experience it yourself or you know anyone that has, trying to strike a balance between being fair to yourself and not beating yourself up too much. So getting stuck in phase 2, where I'm looking in the mirror, admitting my shortcomings, but I'm just crucifying myself about them.
Yeah,
forever.
I've been there.
And
Absolutely.
I can't get to the part where I start to improve. Have you ever experienced that or known anyone that has? And how, if so,
on both sides, experience and know people that have, both mentees and mentors and peers. And I think, I had this chat with one of my mentors and got some great advice. And he said, look, the people that want to change to make others better.
Yeah.
The people that don't want to change because it makes them feel bad.
I see.
And when you really think about that, we stay in comfort zones because it makes us feel good.
Yeah, it's safe.
But then when you take it off of the spotlight off of you and put it on someone else, and you're like, how is the way I'm approaching this conversation, this relationship, whatever it may be, personally or professionally, how is this going to positively impact the other person? Then it becomes much easier to make that change to number 3 and get out of the analysis paralysis of number 2.
Yeah. And I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I read John Maxwell, 5 Levels of Leadership. The 5th level, ideally where all leaders want to strive to be, is where you're creating other leaders.
Yep.
You're helping improve people's lives, get them from where they are to where they want to go. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's that shift from creating managers to creating other leaders.
Yeah.
And managers you create because you think they have a skill set to do a specific role. Leaders you create because they have unlimited opportunity and potential.
Right. Now, would you say a simple definition of the difference between a leader and a manager is leading by inspiration versus being authoritative? Meaning, I think Simon Sinek talks about this as well in his books. Authoritative is you do what I say because I have authority over you, versus as an inspirational leadership, you get people bought into a vision and they do things as they want to, not because you tell them to or because they feel they have to. Would you agree?
I agree. I'll give you an even simpler analogy and definition. Managers are valuable because they do this. Leaders are invaluable because they do that.
Okay, I like that. Perfect. So let's change gears one more time and let's dig into some of the things that you're working on. I want to get to your book. That's going to be sort of the last stop on this journey today. But I'm going to share my screen and let's talk about a few different things that you're working on that are pretty amazing. So you started your own company, didn't you?
I did. I started about 3.5 years ago, as I said earlier, because I felt like I had gotten too ivory towered in corporate and I was no longer a roll up your sleeve practitioner. So I said, I need to get back out here. And plus it was one of those things that was on that list that I talked about earlier of what am I good at? What will I get paid for that piece?
Right.
And I thought, if I don't do it now, I will what if for the rest of my life. And you've known me for a decade. I'm not a what if kind of guy.
Right. And so talk to me about some of the things that you offer. So it looks like you started your own consulting organization, and
Yeah,
you
it
cover
was focused
sales.
on kind of three things. One was sales enablement consulting, and that is either helping to build a sales enablement organization inside of companies or helping them to up level. The
Mhm.
next piece was around leadership coaching, true leadership coaching of how do you become a stronger leader through empathy, humanity, and compassion. And then the final piece was taking all that together as a professional keynote speaker globally.
So let's dig in a little bit on the last one, because we've spoken about sales enablement a bit and we've talked about leadership a bit, but let's talk about keynote speaking. So
Yes.
public speaking is definitely something I enjoy. And
Mhm.
I know, though, that a lot of people, like my wife, for example, are very afraid of public speaking.
Absolutely. It's the
Because,
number one
there's
fear on the planet.
yeah, so outside of professional settings, obviously there's opportunities at weddings and at parties and at
Mhm.
other functions to speak in public, but it's scary for a lot of folks. Can you give me just a little bit of background on sort of how you approach that fear and how you help people overcome it?
Again, it goes back to the why behind this. I
Mhm.
think you get to a certain age and stage where you have amassed enough examples, best practices, stories, etc., that it's incumbent upon you to share. Like I said, not doing this, but opening up your arms and sharing. And I felt like I'd gotten to that point around sales enablement specifically, right? And what I wanted to do was go out and give some of those best practices to help people not step in the holes that I had stepped in. How can I help them up level their game based upon practical real life experience? Whether it be at a sales kickoff or it's at a QBR or a business meeting, an environment where I could come in and say, I've been there and done this. I don't think I'm the best ever, but I think I've done okay with it. So let me give you some best practices, some tips and tricks to make life a little easier for you.
Okay, now just jumping around your website, I noticed here you've got a Udemy course. Can you tell me a little
Yes.
bit about that, what that's all about, and how?
Very proud of that one. It is the first ever course on Udemy around sales enablement. And the goal here was literally a baseline of understanding both the art and science of sales enablement. What is it? What's the value of it? How's it deployed? What should it look like? Where should it sit in an organization? I'm proud to say that that thing has become a bestseller in 60 countries. And I think it's still, was it rated a 4.4 out of 5 with over almost 600 students. So the great thing is when it first went out, is for the individuals. Now this is actually being bundled inside of corporations. And it was the genesis for the book.
Well, perfect segue then, I guess. I want to talk to Sales Enablement Society also, but before we go there, I guess, let's go ahead and jump to the book because you just mentioned it. So you have a link on your website about the book. I'm just going to click here. And obviously here we have on Amazon, we have a link, and I'll put in the description in the video so people
Thank
can
you.
find it. So just talk to me about, what made you want to write a book in the first place? And for anyone who's curious about writing a book in general, can you talk about what that experience is like?
Yes. Let's start with the experience first.
Yeah.
Painful. It felt like the closest thing that you and I will ever come to childbirth.
Okay.
And I sincerely mean that. That third trimester, I went through a writing cohort for 8 weeks, and it was absolutely amazing. It's that third trimester, as I'll call it, that you're almost at the finish line. I could find reasons to do anything but write. Ask my wife, do you want me to wash the cars? Do you want me to dust? Do you want me to vacuum, cut the lawn? She's like, no, you have a gardener and we have this all taken care of. Go write. It was because you were just this close, but you just couldn't get over that last hump. So in my wife's infinite wisdom, she sent me off to a hotel room for 2 weekends in a row. No social media, no phone, no nothing. And I just wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it from the perspective, and this is the advice I always get to any burgeoning author, whether it's self-published or otherwise, something that my editor taught me. And she said, I want you to write with your ego, and then we will edit with your heart.
Oh, that's really nice. I like
Give them everything you think they need to know, and then let's trim it down to what's going to be important to them. So the book itself is literally about, it's the blueprint to sales enablement excellence. And I call it sales enablement 3.0. It takes you through the history of sales enablement from the sales 1.0, enablement 1.0 of the traveling salesman, all the way up to the dot-com boom. And it's literally about the future of sales enablement. Where are we going? Not the old school, what have we done around, increase time to speed, decrease time to revenue, increase productivity, those kind of, and of course on the back end with customer success, creating customers for life.
Right.
While that's wonderful, that was pre-COVID. That's not where we are now. 3.0 to me is, how do you have enablement woven into the fabric of your company as a part of the go-to-market strategy? How do you help your customers to maintain the customers they have? How do you help them to mitigate risk? How do you help them to decrease costs? Things that are really materially impacting their business. That is the new definition of sales enablement.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So 3.0, I hear about obviously 2.0 a lot, and I don't know that I've seen 3.0 yet. So you're ahead of the game, I think, or at least as far as I'm concerned. Talk to me more about what that means. Let's talk a little bit more details. I obviously have an opinion. I worked for a sales enablement company in the past. I actually gave a presentation, I think, at SaaStr about sales enablement myself.
Yeah.
But so I certainly have my opinions, but I'm curious to hear from you, being the expert, and talk to me about what you think the future holds for sales reps to continue to be productive in today's sort of environment.
Well, I break it into 3 pieces: communication, collaboration, and orchestration. So the communication piece is making sure that everyone is on the same page. There's consistent messaging and positioning and objection handling, and all of this is not confusing the buyer. And ultimately, sales enablement starts with the buyer's journey, right? How are they buying? Why are they buying? What are they buying? And then coming down the next step, what's our sales process around this? And then underneath that, I'll call it the selling motions, the sales methodology, and all those pieces. Coming down one more level is all of the assets from marketing, product marketing, comp intel, et cetera. And then at the baseline, like a house, the slab is really all of the enablement activities that supports all of those and makes sure that we've got a strong foundation for the house. That's the communication. The collaboration is, enablement is literally, when done properly, is the hub that spokes out to every part of the organization: product marketing, product management, engineering, HR, sales, et cetera. So how do we make sure that those ties stay connected, right? And then finally, the orchestration piece. And I always give it in this analogy. Think about an orchestra. You've got woodwinds, brass, strings, percussion, all trying to play the right song at the same time. But the problem is sometimes the notes are sour, they may be out of tune, they're stepping over each other. Until one person or organization, both in the orchestra and internally, we have the same thing: product marketing, engineering, HR, we're all trying to do the right thing, customer success, all of us, trying to do the right thing on behalf of the company. But the problem is sometimes left hand doesn't know what right hand's doing. We're sending out messaging that sits on top of each other. Our positioning may not always align, until one person or organization steps up and taps the stand, which I believe is sales enablement, as the orchestra master. And guess what? All of that noise and chaos then becomes a beautiful sheet of music. That is sales enablement 3.0.
That's beautiful. I love it. Now, I just, when did the book go live?
It dropped April 23rd on my birthday. It was my birthday present to me.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so it's been about 6 months or so. So that's really fantastic. And I envy you, because writing is not my favorite thing to do either. Frankly, it's exactly why I do these video interviews, because I prefer the spoken word. So I admire you for being able to overcome some of the challenges around writing.
I, like you, don't enjoy writing. and I enjoyed this because it was different. But I'll tell you, I just finished my audiobook last week. That'll drop in November.
Oh, right.
And I enjoyed the audiobook so much more
Yeah.
than I did writing the book, because I got a chance to give inflection
Yeah.
and intonation and literally have, back to our point earlier, have a conversation one-on-one with every individual that's going to listen to that audio.
Yeah, the spoken word is definitely your preferred method of communication, right?
100%.
So yeah, I noticed that here on your website, it mentions audiobook coming soon. So I'm sure, again, I'll put the link in the description of the video to your website, and
thank you.
They'll have access to the audiobook once it goes live. Now, real quick, before we talk about the Sales Enablement Society, I also noticed here you've got a podcast. Is that right?
I don't have a podcast.
Oh,
I sit on a ton of podcasts. So
okay.
what I do is I wanted to find an amalgamation of all the different podcasts so folks could go to one place if they want to know more about enablement. And it's all sitting here.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, good. So this will give tremendous resources to anyone coming to your website to find what they need to help them along.
Absolutely.
So last topic then, let's talk about the Sales Enablement Society, I guess, that you helped found.
Yes. Helped to found the Sales Enablement Society years back. Now think about this. We wanted the Sales Enablement, initially the goal was to take the Sales Enablement Society to be the equivalent of PMI for project management. Consistent nomenclature, tools, templates, processes, etc. And it has come a long way since I sat down with the guys way back when. And now there's an annual conference. There are, God, I don't even know how many different sections and sectors there are. It's a global entity now. Matter of fact, about a month ago, I got a chance to speak with the Sales Enablement Society chapter in South Africa.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it is literally a global entity now.
And how many?
Where it is.
Sorry, Roger.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that I don't know the exact number of members and chapters now because it keeps growing. Okay. Every time I talk to someone, I get a new number. What I will say is, if you're looking for consistency in resources, in advice, in best practices, in nomenclature, etc., this is the place to go to.
Okay, perfect. You read my mind, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. That's what I was going to ask you is, how big has it grown? Because I know it's been quite a few years, and here I can see obviously the chapters all over the world. So it must feel pretty good, right? I mean, to have helped found an organization that's now global, right? And you're helping millions of people, not just in the US, but all over the world that are looking to improve themselves.
It's truly an honor, and it's humbling to see what this has turned into. It really is. Couldn't have imagined it was going to be as well received as it has been. And
I'm looking here, the guiding principles stand out to me. Are there any one, I'm not sure they're all equally important, but is there any that before we run out of time, you just want to touch on that maybe are most impactful for you?
I'll be honest, I know that has changed recently, so I can't speak directly to the principles for now.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, perfect. So let me stop sharing the screen. We've got a couple of minutes left, Roderick. So we learned about obviously your upbringing and eventually moving from Louisiana to California, your athletics background and your professional accomplishments. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you're most sort of proud of or that you want to share with others so that they might learn from as well?
I think it's, and I struggled with this for the longest. Never allow what you do to overcome who you are. Mm-hmm. Because it's very easy to get caught up in, this is what I do, this is the company I work for, this is my title, this is my responsibility. Always make time to step back and remember why you're doing this, either for your own edification and your own growth, or because it's, in my case, and I'm sure yours, to provide and protect for your family and to build that legacy piece. And I had to get deep into my 40s before I realized how important that really is to make sure that you never lose the guiding light of why you're doing whatever it is you do, right? And for the longest, I would have people say, so what's your hobby? What are you doing when you're not on stage, when you're not on podcasts? And I was like, what is this hobby thing you speak of, right? But as I get older, it's more important to establish something just for you that you do. Not that you share and you do it for the family. We all do that, or you're doing it for a company, but just for you. And for me, it's come down to two things. One is have a bocce ball court built in my backyard now. Yeah, literally a bocce ball court. And absolutely, my wife's Irish Italian. My grandpa got me started, her grandpa got me started on bocce. And one, it's still super competitive.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt the next 3 days. And how can you be mad at anything that you call a sport that you can do with a cocktail in your hand? Come on now, right? And secondly, being from the South, I'm a Texan. We barbecue. I'll get out there on that grill and do tri-tip and brisket and ribs and you name it. And again, sometimes it's about the process of watching that raw meat gum and grow into something that's edible for the family. But, making our own rub and our own sauce It's the whole process that comes that I enjoy about it, right? It's not standing out there and burning up and having the smoke in your face. There's something to be said for that. But again, it's a process, but it's just for me. I don't share that with anybody. With my son, teaching him, because I got to pass on the family history and those kind of things. But for the most part, it's how do I get out here and do something that is just for me? Because I'm doing something for someone or a company all the time. Don't get lost up in the shuffle. Don't get caught up in the wave. It's too easy, like I said, to focus on what you do versus who you are. Never let those intertwine, because both of us are old enough now, Anton, we know what you do is always going to win over who you are. So make sure that you carve out some time to recharge your batteries. Get away from screen time. Get away from social media. Take a break. Sometimes go take a cleanse. Right. I think I'm on the verge of needing one right now, to be quite honest, of a social media cleanse, because you get so wrapped up in, and we all have these personas, because let's be honest, social media is all the wonderful things that's going on. Right? Very few people say, I'm having a rough day, life stinks. Right. It's, oh, I'm wonderful, and I did this, and I'm going here, and I'm speaking there. And sometimes you have to step back from that persona and be like, okay, I just need to get to know me a little better for a week, or take a weekend. Go get a massage, go get a manicure, pedicure, something that is just for you. Detox. Absolutely.
Unplug. I'm a big fan of that myself, and I encourage anyone that isn't taking enough time off and maybe feeling burnt out, take the time to recharge your batteries, unplug, take care of yourself, and you'll ultimately be happier and more productive. So Roger,
I got one thing to add onto that really quickly.
Go ahead.
A firm belief of mine. Whether you have unlimited PTO or you have a set number of PTO days at your company, I don't care how successful you are that year, you hit all your deliverables, you over exceeded quota, whatever it is. If you get to the end of the year and you still have PTO days unused, you failed.
Right. I agree. And that's not something that I used to do when I was younger, and I acquired.
Neither of us. Neither of us.
So highly recommend.
We all had carryover to the next year, right?
That's right.
But now, if you have carryover days, you failed.
100% agree. Roderick, listen, this has been really wonderful. I know you've got a hard stop, so I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you're super busy. What I took away from today's conversation more than anything, I think, is your passion. Roderick, sounds like whether you're barbecuing or talking about sales enablement or playing bocce, you're passionate. And I think that's no surprise as far as why you've been so successful, and your accomplishments are quite significant. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. Let's keep in touch. And
we will.
I'll put links in the description to your LinkedIn site, as well as your sales enablement, your own consulting firm website, and obviously the book. Everybody watching, go out there and get it. Roderick, you're the man. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, man. Always good to catch up with you.
We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.